Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Final Fantasy Brave Exvius. My name is Mars, and today we're going to be doing the complete guide for CG Elena, who is the brand new hotness in Final Fantasy Global, and my goodness, is she a fun unit to use. But many people did notice upon release, when looking at her kit and when looking at the wiki page and things like that, Elena's kit can look very confusing. So today we want to kind of break it down, look at how you can use her, what sort of rotations you want to follow, and how you can get the best value out of her, because Elena is without a doubt one of the top contenders in the game for the damage spot, with a huge amount of versatility and flexibility and just all around a crap load of fun to use. So before diving into her kit, I do want to highlight her TMR and her STMR. Her TMR is Estrella. It is a two-handed sword that only she can use that grants 150 attack and 130 magic. Now, the only other sword that is similar to this is Aurora Freyavia's STMR, but it is worth noting that Estrella is always going to be better. And the reason for that is because Estrella has slightly higher damage variance. So you can use Aurora Freyavia's STMR as long as you have, Elena's STMR to proc her passive, but Estrella is always going to be better. So I highly recommend this weapon. Use it on Elena, but it cannot be used on anybody else, unfortunately. Now, her STMR can be used by anybody, and it is disgustingly good. It, in my opinion, is one of the best STMRs in the game. Probably not the best, but it is definitely one of the top tier STMRs in the game. An unconditional 60% attack and magic with 50% attack and magic true double hand. So this is disgustingly powerful. It's probably going to be best in slot for any of your true double hand damage dealers, whether they're hybrids, mages, or physical damage dealers, probably for the rest of forever. It's ridiculous. So if you happen upon it, I'm going to recommend that most people go for the STMR, get it, because the amount of power that Elena and your other units will get out of using it is pretty humongous. And there's no reason to keep two Elena chaining partners, especially with how popular Elena is. Now, if you look at Elena's skills, she does have quite a few of them, so it's easy to get overwhelmed, but I'm going to break it down as simply as possible. She basically has two different sort of stances that she can go down, but ultimately they don't make that much of a difference on her rotation. It just changes what abilities are unlocked. So she has Aurora Arts and Blossom Arts, and each of these respectively unlock two different skill sets. They will either unlock elemental imperils or elemental resistances. They can increase modifiers to damaging attacks. They can grant HP barriers to your allies. They can imperil ice or I think light. Yes, ice or light, depending on which one you choose. However, for the most part, it doesn't actually, those unlocked skills don't tend to fall in your typical rotation. The most important thing that both of these skills do is increase the modifier of some of your critical damage skills. Now, Elena has a few damage skills, but the two that you're going to be using the most are Blade of Crystal, which is her most powerful single target attack, and Aurora Tempest, which is her most powerful area of effect attack. Now, she does also have Blade of the Dawn, which I have to look real quick because I can't remember what the frames are. Yeah, that's Ariel Ray chaining family, and then Blade of the Heavens is Stardust Ray. So she does have a few chaining family options, and they do quite a lot of damage, except for Blade of the Dawn, which kind of does the least, unfortunately. But she does have all of those options. Now, when you are using CG Elena, there are two different ways that you can use her. You can use her as somebody who imbues and imperils herself, or you can use external imbues and imperils. So she has four different skills that are her enervation skills that imperil and imbue each of these respective elements between water, thunder, ice, and light. This is really handy if you need to just reduce the overall stress on your party. She can imperil for herself, she can imbue for herself. This lets you take advantage of elemental chaining and elemental weaknesses without relying on an external imbuer, which is really, really handy. It's not going to yield you your greatest damage, however. So that's one option. If you want to open up a fight, you can use one of her self, imbue, and imperil skills, or you can use her cooldown skills. Now each of them provides something different, but the one that's the most important for your opener is Way of the Aurora. This one is a huge cooldown skill that can be used every 5 turns. It imperils ice resistance, light resistance, buffs her attack and magic by 250%, which is huge. Increases fire, ice, light, and dark resistance, and it increases the modifiers for all of her relevant damage abilities, and it fills her limit gauge. So this is a really good ability to combo with Aurora Arts. So keep in mind the color coding. There's Aurora Arts comboed with Way of the Aurora, and then there's Blossom Arts, which you can combo with Way of the Blossom. Now the Way of the Aurora combo of, turn 1 open with Starlight, because she has 3 different multicast skills. Starlight, I think, is the only one that can let you multicast both of those. Twilight is exclusively for her damage skills, and then Speed of Light is also exclusively for damage skills, but Starlight lets her do most of her skills. So you would probably open turn 1 if you have an external imbuer with Aurora Arts and then Way of the Aurora. And go ahead and pop it like that. Yeah, that's amazing. The reason why that's so good is because it also increases the modifier for some of her skills indefinitely. It lasts forever. And Aurora Arts, for example, gives her a 10-turn 150% attack magic buff. So when her big one from the cooldown skill wears off, you are left behind with 150%, which is still pretty good. Now you'll see that Aurora Arts is no longer available here. As soon as you activate it, you're basically in that stance. So you get the increased modifier for a lot of your skills, and you benefit for 10 turns for your attack and magic, as well as charm resist. And these abilities become available. So if you wanted to change stance at any time, you can always activate Blossom Arts, and it will open up your other set of skills. And those skills tend to be more supportive, they tend to be more defensive, but honestly, most people are just using Elena for damage, so you're probably not going to use them that much. So your alternative, as I was saying, if instead of using Aurora Arts and the cooldown skill, what you could do instead is use Aurora Arts, or you could use a self-imbue skill, and so any of these elements here, and then you could use the cooldown skill, and then the following turn you could do Blossom Arts and chain up. So with this particular one, where we're using external imbues and external imperils, what we want to do is go straight into some damage. So Elena already applied an imperil of 75%, which is quite good. We're going to go ahead and use Edgar for a better one, because that's what he does. So thanks to Sylvie and Edgar, we have an imbue, we have an imperil, and now we can use Light of Salvation, which is Elena's limit burst. And this is a really important part of her rotation because it also increases the damage modifier on her relevant damaging skills. In addition to doing that, it buffs all stats by 150% for 3 turns. So, and the modifier increase is very large. It's like an 18 times modifier, which more than doubles the base damage of some of her chaining skills. So yeah, this limit burst is extremely important and very well worth leveling, considering how much you're actually going to use it.
Light of Salvation.
Honestly, I don't think I ever get tired of this limit burst. It is very cool. And I love that they designed a unit who actually uses it, because there are a lot of CG units out there who don't actually get to use their LB as part of their standard rotation. So turn 1, you activate your cooldown skill and Aurora Arts, and then turn 2, you use the limit burst. Turn 3 is when you explode your opponents. And your 2 best options for that are going to be Blade of Crystal and Aurora Tempest. Blade of Crystal is definitely the most highly recommended because it's bolting strike, single target, does the most damage, And if you triple cast that using Speed of Light, which is activated by her Trust passive, you can do a crap load of damage. Now, of course, you can do any of these other chaining skills if you're chaining with other people, or if you're looking to do area of effect damage or things like that. But if you're trying to maximize your damage rotation, turn 3 you want to be using 3 Blade of Crystal, and that's absolutely going to do an insane amount of damage. Yeah, it's just a stupid amount of damage. It's ridiculous. I'm a huge fan. I love ridiculous damage. So that was almost 1 billion damage with no chains. Like, forget about it, dude. That was ridiculous. Now, the nice thing about turn 4 is that you get to repeat that because most if not all of her modifier buffs are still available. And you can go ahead and activate it again. And Edgar is going to keep up those imperils that he's got. So yeah, that's turn 4. Now from turn 5, you do start to get a little bit of drop off on the added modifiers. So that's when you want to start kind of rebuilding again for another burst turn. There are a few ways to do it because Blossom Arts Aurora Arts was what you opened with, and you still get the modifier from that, but you do want to have your Limit Burst available to use. But let's say by turn 5 you don't quite have it ready. One of your options is to go ahead and swap into Blossom Arts stance and activate Way of the Blossom, and this is going to set you up with a full Limit Burst gauge and get you ready to go on your rotation again. You go ahead and activate that, and it fills your entire Limit Burst gauge, so this sets you up to be successful on your following turns. This is really handy in fights like Lich, where there are a limited number of Limit Burst crystals that your party can generate. So this would set me up on turn 6 to have my Limit Burst again, and of course you always want to make sure that you have your Imbue available, as well as any imperils that you might be using, or if you're taking advantage of weaknesses, that's fine too. We'll skip it this time for brevity's sake. I hate doing it, but you know, we have a guide to get through. So that's your turn 6, and that gets you back locked and loaded with all of those bonus extra amazing modifiers, and you'll see that Aurora Arts is back and available for use again, and you can see these other skills that have unlocked and that you can multicast them using, I think, just Starlight, which is too bad, but it's handy. If you happen to need any of these things, there's mitigation buffs, there's resistance buffs, there's imperils, there's all sorts of stuff in there. But, I mean, the rest of my party has that covered, so I don't really care. I just want to get the damage out of Elena. So, now that we've activated some of our cooldowns to give us some modifier buffs, and then we've done the Limit Burst again, we're ready to just hit with big triple Blade of Crystal. Yeah, forget about it. It's just, it's so much damage. It's so much damage. I love it so much. Let's see, yeah, that was a comparable amount of damage. But one of the things that can confuse people about Elena is kind of balancing all of these different modifier boosts. Don't get too hung up on it. Just know that the simplest way to get a big boost in damage is to make sure that you're in one of the arts stances. So you can tell you're in one as long as you see some of these bonus abilities and one of the arts abilities is missing. And then if your cooldowns are on cooldown, that's another way to tell if you've got some modifier buffs, because I believe Way of the Aurora, for example, gives you a really sizable modifier buff, as does Way of the Blossom. And then if you just use your Limit Burst, that's going to give you your biggest modifier increase. So the idea is that you load up all of those different buffs, blow your enemies away, and then set up to do it all again. Now the good news is that currently there are basically no enemies that can survive this turn. If you execute this rotation with Elena, everything is dead. There's no way for them to survive. Now, Elena is obviously awesome, but one of the things that we have to talk about every time a hybrid damage dealer comes out is builds. So let's go ahead and jump over to some of those. All right, so the first build I would like to look at is what is probably her best in slot build, but only by the tiniest margin. This is, of course, you know, as usual, a Super Whale STMR builds, primarily STMRs, a few 5-star based TMRs, but even includes Adventurer 5, which is something that anybody can acquire. Now, of course, in all of these builds, you're going to use Estrella because it is the best weapon she can equip. And we do have Red Helibor from Carlette in the hat slot. We have Freya Via's suit in the chest slot. And you can use Freya via suit for any of these builds. All the builds feature it because Elena has a passive that gives her extra tankiness whenever she has a robe equipped. So even though something like Felix's STMR can give you slightly higher stats, I definitely prefer Freya via suit because it gives you 30% defense, spirit, HP, and MP. So it is definitely worth a little bit of a trade-off in damage for a lot of increase in tankiness. Now this build also features the Florid Hairpin, which is Freya via's STMR. The Florid Hairpin is a really handy item for this build because it does cap us out on true double hand to a maximum of 300% for both attack and magic. The other accessory slot is occupied by Ravenheart, which gives a humongous amount of attack and magic, both flat and percentage, and it gives us some killers, and it gives us some MP, some defense, some spirit. It gives you some of anything, and it really is just one of the best STMRs in the game. Now, of course, a whale build for Elena would not be complete without Warrior of the Crystal, which is her STMR. And to fill out the rest of the slots, we do have some hybrid materias such as Adventurer 5 and Nature Loving Spellblade, and as well as a free slot for a materia. So this, of course, is probably going to be cited as the best in slot builds, but a second pick, this is the personal build that I'm running, which includes pretty much all of the same stuff, but instead of a Florid Hairpin, because I don't have one, I'm using instead a second Ravenheart. Now, of course, whale build, but if you are in a situation where you're like, you know what, I have a Ravenheart, and maybe I can STMR Moogle a Ravenheart, Ravenhearts are going to be used for a real long time. They are so stupid powerful. They are, without a doubt, the best STMR in the game, so I highly recommend them. And Hals, for anybody who's familiar with him, awesome FFBE content creator, he and I stayed up late into the night figuring out, okay, what's the best way to build Elena? And even though the Florid Hairpin build gives you 2% more damage, I think, than this build, this one builds in 50% Demon and Bird Killer on top of the Bird Killer she already has, and just is an all-around really awesome build. One of the other changes that is made to this one, because we are not capped on True Double Hand for both, is we swapped out Nature Loving Spellblade for Dark Knight's Knowledge, which is Dark Knight Luneth's TMR. It gives you extra Demon Killer, extra 30% attack, and 50% attack True Double Hand, so this build does leave us beneath the True Double Hand cap for magic. But, of course, not a huge deal. This Elena is going to absolutely rain down on anything that she comes across, especially if it's a demon, because that is a crap load of demon killers from the Ravenhearts, the Dark Knight Knowledge, from her passives. If it's a demon, it's dead. Elena will just glance at it and it will fall over dead. Now, most people are probably most interested in an approximately budget build. There is a prevalent myth that says that units like Elena are difficult to build or they're not free-to-play friendly because of how hard she is to gear, but honestly, gear is a restriction regardless of whether you're using a hybrid damage dealer or not. So I don't think it's a fair argument. It's Elena's kit that makes her good, not the equipment that you put on her just makes her better. Some hybrid things are definitely hard to get your hands on, but not all of them. And this Elena is probably only 25 to 30% weaker than the STMR Super Omega Whale builds. And this one features only 5-star base TMRs or more common. So we've got Estrella, of course, always use that. Black Fox Shapeshifter Mask, which is a good hybrid headpiece from Nagi. Freya via suit again. 2 Kurosame STMRs, which give you flat 40 attack and magic, which is great. And then Magic Charger and Buster Style, which will give us the extra 100% True Double Hand we need to cap out. The last non-killer slot is occupied by Adventurer 5, which of course is an amazing item for hybrids because it gives a lot of attack and magic, in addition to defensive stats like defense and spirit. So this build, while not strictly budget, is definitely an option for people. And of course, keep your eyes out for a lot of hybrid stuff out there. A great example, of course, is the Omega Metal. That's definitely a more budget option than Iceblade Hilt. It gives you 5 less attack and magic, but it is free for completing Omega. There are a lot of options out there. They're just yours to explore. Now, what I recommend for everybody, regardless of, what build you're eyeballing or what you're doing, plug your equipment into the FFBE Equip website. Just do it. people are going to ask in the comments, oh, well, should I equip this, or is this better to equip, or should I equip this? I can't answer that. The only way to find out the best thing to equip for yourself is to let the builder do the math for you. And sometimes you have to do it fight by fight, because Elena is a hybrid damage dealer, and not all of our opponents have the same defense and spirit. So sometimes you're going to want to go magic heavy, or sometimes you're going to want to go attack heavy. It just depends on the opponent that you're up against. So if it matters, or if you're being particular about making sure you have the most damage as possible, put your equipment in the builder, click calculate, lock in as many pieces as you know are going to be best in slot items, click build. Sometimes it takes a while with hybrids for sure, but it's the only way to know for certain if you're using the best build that you have available. So now that we've gone over builds, the last question that a lot of people are going to want to ask is Elena worth pulling for, or is she worth using? And in my opinion, Elena is probably one of the most, well, it's not an opinion, that she's one of the best damage dealers in the game, okay? Without any help, without any external support, she can do more damage than everybody in the game except for Zeno of the Beta Star. And with external help, such as an external imbue and an increased imperil, she can even do more damage than Zeno of the Beta Star. And that's not just an opinion, that's what she does. She does a crazy amount of damage, and Zeno of the Beta Star is overpowered. Like, he is insanely good. Elena can be just a notch higher than that as well. So as far as whether or not her damage is above the cut, it definitely is. Now, as far as whether or not she's worth it for you, I would recommend people who are interested in Elena go ahead and do that free 10+1 if you haven't already that comes on her step up. Use your tickets, use some other things first, because if you can acquire a single Elena, you can complete her step up for a guaranteed one. She is relatively easy to acquire, and she's not horrendous to build, because if all else fails and you don't have hybrid gear, or not all the right hybrid gear, you can build her high attack and get some extra magic, or you can build her high magic, get some extra attack. There's tons and tons of options. One of the things that Elena is really amazing with is chaining with many different elements with many different families, which makes her extremely versatile. It means that there will probably never be a trial where you cannot use Elena. Now, that's a problem we sometimes have with other damage dealers who highly favor particular elements. I think Silka, for example, Summer, Citra, and Folka, they're a great example of a unit that is decent in some trials, but if the trial resists water or light, they're in trouble. But with Elena, she has 4 different elemental options. In addition to going non-elemental, she isn't locked to using elemental damage, so that gives her a huge amount of flexibility. Now, Elena has another quality that I value a lot in damage dealers, which is high burst damage. Burst damage is far more important in Brave Exvius than your damage per turn, and that's because the sooner you can kill a boss, or the more explosively you can burst into your opportunity window and just knock out the boss, the better off you will be. Morgana or Silka are great examples of units that have decent damage per turn, but it often means you have to deal with all of these threshold attacks before the boss dies. With units like Elena or Esther or Zeno of the Beta Star, you can do a lot of damage all up front. Regina is a great example of this too. These characters are great at doing a ton of damage, all stuffed in one turn, and it helps you not have to hold out for as long against a particularly difficult boss. So for that reason, I think Elena is incredibly powerful. As far as her future use and utility, she's also a likely candidate to pair well with the future CG Rain, because Elena's Limit Burst can chain with his Limit Burst, and both of them do crazy amounts of damage, so that's an option that you can keep in mind. She also chains her LB with CG Hyo, which he's bound to get his enhancements in Global eventually, and it wouldn't surprise me if they gave him a Bolting Strike thing so that he'd be able to chain with more people like Elena. So those are just a few things to consider. I definitely think she's worth it. If you already have Esther or Zeno or Sabin or Regina, you definitely don't need Elena. In my opinion, she's probably one of the more interesting choices because she is a hybrid and you can get a lot of different sorts of use out of her. But definitely not a must pull if you have your damage dealers taken care of. So with that, we bring our complete guide for CG Elena to a close. Let me know what you think of Elena down in the comments below, and I will see everybody in the next video.